Hello. Just continuing my my attempt to kind of even out my rating a little. Come on, chess.com. Let's see if we can find a game. It's been a brutally glorious week so far. We had our snow earlier, then just days of incredibly warm weather, and then sudden stupendous incredibly cold snaps, and that all kind of culminated in a few hours of really heavy snow over the last couple of days, just for a few hours each day, and now it's just glorious again. I was just out hiking, it was lovely, really enjoyed myself. So I opened with e4 just 'cause that's what I do. My opponent came back at me with e6, presumably preferring the French defense. If I knew anything about the French defense, I'd know what to do next, but I really don't. So I just kind of follow that whole when in doubt develop thing. Look for building a classical pawn center. I probably should have just went d4, shouldn't I? Well, you know, now I've got a piece out. Ha! Thank you for the opportunity to play d4, my friendly opponent. TruthDivision from Canada, it looks like. Oh, how delightful. I hope that you are doing exceptionally well today. Ah, this was not something I expected to see. I wonder if my opponent is actually planning on playing e5. This kind of reveals a shortcoming of bringing this knight out early, doesn't it? Because if this knight weren't out, then I could prop my stuff up with c3, and then if e5, I'd be just fine, whereas right now I'm kind of boxed in a little. Nonetheless, when in doubt, get your pieces out. Knight to f3 it is. Oh, my opponent's not playing anything that I thought that my opponent would. And you know, good for you, TruthDivision. Good for you. Let's see. Pieces out. Bishop c4. Pawn thrust to b5. Just going to withdraw, see what they do. I may need to keep in mind that at some point I'll have to play a3 to give my bishop a retreat square. But overall, I'm feeling fairly good. Just going to castle. I just kind of wonder what that move g5 is doing. Perhaps preventing bishop f4? Seems like weakening the g7 square, though, might be non-ideal. If we look right now, it's not really safe to castle to either side, because all these pawns no longer form a safe wing for the king. But what do I know? I actually don't know very much about chess at all. I kind of accept that. Move on with my life. Gonna castle kingside. Kind of feeling safe from both of these bishops right now. This queen-bishop battery is weak. And there we go, the first thrust of the game. Clearly I'm just going to play the knight backwards. The question is where. Knight to d2 means that the only place to bring it back to is there, whereas if knight to e1, then I have the possibility of jumping, and maybe jumping and influencing the center too. Bringing a knight back that far is always a little nerve-wracking. But what else can I do? I'm far ahead in development, so there are any other options. I don't want to lose my knight. This of course reveals an attack with the queen, and if my opponent simply pushes, then I'm going to take with the f-pawn to open up the rook on the f-file. Oh, I'm getting pawn stormed. How crazy is this? When one person is playing on the wing, I think John Bartholomew says you have counterplay in the center. Although my pieces are a little far back for comfort right now. Specifically, my queenside bishop and my kingside knight. This leap seems useful. I actually want to open lines up, so I'm not at all concerned about that push. I'm just going to capture on c6. Now I'm going to bring my knight in. You'll notice that this f6 push blocks this dark square bishop. And the idea, incidentally, of bringing my knight in is actually just to support a pawn push. Presumably, though, my opponent's going to capture before it comes to that. No. That pawn push just outright wins a piece, right? Once I've completed this, presumably capturing the knight, I'll probably need to concentrate on actually getting my pieces up and addressing what the hell is going on over here. G3 might be useful just to kind of back these guys off a little. What would be the most annoying piece? Made my opponent capture a knight. I'm sorry. I don't know why, but that just tickled me bright pink. Maybe open a line first. This capture is a little annoying. Kind of helps my opponent out with development. I always mean to wish my opponents good luck at the beginning of the games, just because I really mean it, right? I really just want a fun time, and once again I've forgotten to do that. So, go James. I imagine, I don't know, but I imagine that the reason my opponent is delaying in capturing with the queen is that this knight can come in with check, which is, annoying as hell. But I'm not sure that it actually amounts to much. I mean, I don't see any obviously devastating follow-up to that. King over and then knight back, right? I think my opponent made a wise choice here. Like, this pawn isn't going anywhere, right? This bishop is bad and this knight is potentially active. But I'm still nonetheless tempted to grab this bishop because it's very easy to reopen it and give me some annoyings, and that also renders my opponent with a permanent dark square weakness, which I can take advantage of with the very simple bishop out, which helps me with development. Bishop out. So let's play pretend for a minute as though I'm any good at this. Let's assume and king recapture. You may as well, right? Bishop out, rook over. Maybe bishop back just to block these pawns up. I don't like the bishop on the edge. But what would my opponent do then? Maybe then the recapture? Do I even need to capture this bishop yet? I don't, do I? So if capture, this knight is quite adequately defended. I was just looking at the very tempting bishop out, knight capture, capture. Then I was noticing this fails because this knight can then recapture and I'm just a plain old piece down. You know, I'm ahead in material, right? So this seems reasonable. Went ahead, simplify. Okay. Looks like I'm giving my opponent something to think about. Ah, there we go. So what have we got now? I have a couple of problems, right? One is that these two pieces aren't out yet. I'd really like this knight to be here. How does it get there? Leap, leap, leap. Or even leap, leap, and assuming nothing else changes, leap, right? And then I've got a pleasant fork. So let's just pretend that that might happen. This also gives me an opportunity to bring the rook over, which is x-raying this little line up here. In fact, if my opponent plays here, then I will undoubtedly just bring the rook over. It often seems like a wise strategy is just kind of restricting your opponent and giving them maneuvering issues. Although maybe if my opponent plays here, I'll actually just bring the knight over as I'd speculated about. Pawn capture. Knight threatened. I didn't really look at what this enables. This placement of the bishop before I made this move. I should have taken a few seconds here. It seems like I'm giving such an imminent threat, though, that whatever this enables is going to have to hang out for a minute. And if either of these pieces move, I think I'll just move my rook over, get her on the same file as the king. I'm not really thinking this through very effectively, though. So what am I seeing? My opponent has what? One. Let me see if I can do this. Ha! Blue. So my opponent has 3 pawn islands. They're connected pawns. My opponent does have a good center. So that's interesting. I hadn't really paid enough attention to that. Controlling all these. I'm glad that I've taken that dark square bishop out so that this can't really be taken advantage of with a bishop. My opponent also has slightly better development than me, funnily enough now. This is still the square that I'm kind of eyeing for this bishop. G5. But you know, I guess there's not that much good to say about e3, right? Where can I go? d4, c5, b6 are all protected, and the queen is laterally protecting the a7 pawn. So I don't really have any action over there, although I'm just keeping an eye on the squares, which can be useful by itself. But I think the only thing with any imminent danger of coming into one of these squares is the b8 rook. It's an interesting defense. It does encourage just swapping the knights, kind of sandwiching the bishop straight in this hole. Or even the queen, really. Queen might be a good move. Queen would be a good move, wouldn't it? Let's just make this one happen then, real quick. I am, of course, threatening both the queen on e7 and the rook on b6 and the knight on f6. I'm expecting my opponent to simply recapture with the f6 knight, in which case I can make my queen active. Something I'd noticed immediately in the case of something like a threat from the f5 bishop onto e6 is that I can simply come back here with check, right? I'm happy to just swap the queens if my opponent's queen comes to d8, because I'm ahead in material. That seems perfectly reasonable to me. But the idea is, there we are, removed the possibility. The idea was simply that after the king moves from check, this rook would have been hanging. So let's actually stop for a second. These two rooks are unprotected. The f5 bishop is unprotected. I can deliver a quick check on c6. I don't know what it gets me yet. Now, if this queen were not here, how hard would it be to checkmate? It's always a good question, right? How hard would it be? I would give check. The king would have to move to d8. I would want to have the dark square bishop in that case. I mean, typically you need two pieces plus the queen, right? Like, not always, but typically. Although, so what I'm wondering is, yeah, if I do this, move the bishop to g5 to distract the queen, give back the material for a tempo, I just don't think that this queen to f7 check is strong enough to be meaningful. Connecting my rooks would be nice, though. Here's what I'm going to do. Rook over, and then play for a push with f4. The problem is the en passant capture, so that won't work. Check. If the king moves to f8, then my dark square bishop can come in with check, but then it just gets captured. So that wouldn't be a very meaningful check, would it? What is it that I can gang up on here? I'm just going to bring the rook into the game. Not worry too much. I don't think that the... Oh gosh, maybe I should have brought the rook all the way over to d1. Just to double up on this pawn. The d6 pawn, sorry. This offers some restriction though, which is nice. You know, the pawn is now pinned. The e pawn, the e5 pawn is now pinned. So after developing this bishop to where now? Doesn't have a good safe square, does it? I guess to d2, rook over, then bishop to b4. The b4 looks like a good spot for this bishop, right? d2, b4. Yeah! Eyeing the d6 pawn, eyeing the queen behind it. And now with the pressure from the rook as well, that could be fairly uncomfortable. And these two bishops then, a bishop on b4 and a bishop on b3, would just be super unpleasant if the d6 pawn were ever eliminated. Like, that's an awful lot of territory on the king's side there. Eliminating the check. So presumably my opponent might be thinking of playing the bishop to e6. I'd been eyeing this just while I was quiet there. That a bishop to e6... No, I can just capture it, because I have a queen bishop battery here. Maybe my opponent's considering bringing the rook over, but then this tactic from earlier, right? The queen to a8. Then I guess my opponent can just bring his rook back. It'll be protected. So do I want to aim to get my bishop to b4, or do I want to bring my bishop to e3, blocking this rook, but also blocking any annoyances? No, I kind of want my bishop doing good work on b4. If I need to, I can always just withdraw the queen all the way back to... Huh. Am I trapping my queen if I put my bishop here? Rook comes up. Where can it go? Guarded, guarded. This would be guarded. This is guarded. With the check, I'm not actually getting anything because the rook can just come back. This is c4 is guarded. d4. Oh gosh. d3 would both be guarded, and d2 would be blocked. Nice. In which case... Why are these clocks flashing? Is that my connection? I only played this because I was thinking that it might be about to kick me off as timed out. Although I was here and doing things. And I just figured I may as well restrict this while I'm at it. This idea, just because I'm noticing that my queen is actually fully short on squares right now. So yeah, maybe the way to get pressure on d6 is going to be to just bring the rook over. Sometimes I like to be hyper annoying and play a move like bishop to d4, just mocking the fact that this pawn is pinned. Yeah, I'm thinking next rook d1 if there's no substantial change in the position from the next move. I don't see what my opponent can do. I don't think that the queen... that this e7 queen and this f5 bishop are coordinating well, and it's still the case that the bishop and the rooks are unprotected, even though they have the capacity to become protected. Simon Williams in a lot of his videos seems to emphasize just restricting your opponent's plans is good enough, and hopefully this restriction was useful. I suspect, I don't know naturally, but I suspect this was just made because my opponent couldn't see what else to do, and now I can kind of take advantage of the fact that this bishop has been unprotected this whole time, right? Yeah, I can, because I can always retreat back to d5 if necessary. You know, if my opponent plays a move like, yeah, rook to h8. Oh! Now my opponent resigned. I wonder if that was just because I'm so far ahead, or if that was because something just became available on the board. I guess I could have given a check on g6, which would have forced my opponent's king over. Could have gobbled up a pawn. Was there something more damaging on the board? Guess check, king. Yeah, I don't see that I have something super damaging, but I also don't think that my opponent has much counterplay right now. Feels like I'm a lot of material ahead. Let's super quickly go and visit the analysis board. And something I'm going to try just for a difference is to see whether I can figure out how to flip the board and do the analysis from my opponent's perspective. So I opened with e4, e6, knight to c3. As I say, I'm not convinced this was actually a particularly great move. It restricted the c2 pawn, which, given my opponent's next move of c6, I was speculating with the aim of d5, making a nice little kind of pyramid here. Being able to have a pawn thrust out to c4 would have been nice here. But in any case, I just noticed what I ought to have played anyway, which was to build the classical center. And I'm suspicious of this. I don't know if my opponent's actually playing a theory line here that they're aware of. French defense, Queen's Knight variation, according to the opening explorer. The French defense is e6. Ah, right. I always thought of the French defense as being both e6 and d5, with e6 and d5 with c5 coming up. But apparently merely e6 is the French defense. The Queen's Knight variation is knight c3. With c6, yeah, there's just not that many games it looks like in the database. So yeah, let's just carry on looking at this from my opponent's perspective. I really enjoyed the game, by the way, TruthDivision, if you ever end up watching this. I really did enjoy playing you. Knight to f3. See, this, to my mind, bishop to e7 is kind of the drawback of this d6 move. This bishop doesn't have much it can do except play a defensive role. But certainly bishop e7 followed up by knight out and then castles seems like a really very, very, very adequate structure indeed over on the king side. I was very surprised that TruthDivision didn't castle. I just continued with development because that's my kind of mantra. And another pawn move in the opening. If you look, I have 3 pieces out, and my opponent has 4 pawns out. And that's a substantial difference, right? Like, I don't know too much about the hypermodernism and defense and stuff like that. I know that it's more about influencing the center than anything else, but this structure of 3 pawns seemed more than adequate to be influencing the center on the 5th rank, and I didn't understand this. I guess it opens up a path for the light square bishop, but the light square bishop's fairly boxed in. What would I have played? What would I have looked at here? Would I have just played this central thrust? Tried to take advantage of this stuff? Then after, presumably I would have just locked it up. No, because I've got a bishop hanging. Don't be a nitwit. Bloody James. You and your nitwit ideas. I think I would have looked for maybe just retreat. Because if capture, I can always recapture with the knight, and knight's not that bad on e4 in my opinion. We would have a hole present. It's not a true hole, is it, because of this potential b6, but the c5 square is certainly available immediately for the knight. And if not over there, just hanging out in the center unprotected after castles and then bring the castle over to the e-file, I think I would have been okay. So maybe I would have just withdrawn the bishop a square. But in any case, I'm very, very, very hyper suspicious of g5. I'm not sure what it accomplishes, save for allowing that, which I just don't think buys my opponent much. I'll be interested to see where I should have played this knight. I like my intention here, though. And yeah, I just had enough pieces developed that I figured I should open up some lines, break up my opponent's pawn structure, and see what kind of play I could get. From here, certainly the pressure that this knight brings is a little unpleasant, and the knight's in a true hole now, right? Like there's no way that a pawn can come and kick it off. Supported by a bishop and a pawn. There's my line. Come back, line. And by the queen as well. Come on, line. There we go. So there's a lot of support for the knight. And as I say, as I played in the game, I was actually threatening this. I'm fairly sure that the best move here was just straight up recapture and develop a piece. That would have protected the e7 bishop, right? Anyway, let me just dodge back to here. I'm just remembering that it might be productive to just ask the computer right now, where do you think this knight should go? Knight to d2. So keeping it a little further forward. Oh, knight to e1 actually won out after a few minutes of my slow processor allowing the engine to do its thing. Yes. Nice. D takes c6 was considered strong. Not super crushing, but strong. And let's see. Knight f6 is my computer's recommended response. That makes total sense. Prevents the knight from leaping in here. That makes total sense. But after this, oh my gosh, what did I miss? Queen to d5 immediately. Oh, wow. Okay. Queen to d5 with threatening mate. totally missed that. But this is the problem with all these pawns moved out, right? Is that there's just weakness here. So let's bring that back. That was incredible, actually. Okay, so queen here. What would the best move have been? Queen to b6. Making a flight square for the king. Oh wow, I really missed that, didn't I? When things are open and pawns are developed, try and get the queen in the game. Next, queen to f7 with check. King must d8 or d7. No, queen must d8. And then what? Queen to g7. Just threaten the crap out of the rook. b4, I think, was the immediate recommendation. And then c7 with check. Wouldn't have guessed that. But I guess there's no rush about resolving this pressure, is there? Queen takes on c7. And then just queen takes on h8. Mwah. And yeah. Oh wow, I really, really, really missed that. But in any case, the move I played, knight to d5, isn't even on the radar. Way to be, James. You took a crushing position and turned it into an adequate position. Knight takes on b5 was the next most strongly recommended move. Oh no, c7 immediately. What? No poppin' way. So what the heck happens? Queen takes c7. Oh, and then just queen d5. And the position from earlier plays out naturally. Missing this queen to d5 is apparently an absolute sin. But given how the game actually went, c7 was the strongest move in this position, the computer thinks. My opponent played queen up, which surely was the best move. Yeah, queen d7. Now, was that capture best? I think it was. And it's always funny to see this, right? Even though the immediate recapture was clearly self-evident and is self-evident in all the lines, it would nonetheless have been a little stronger, apparently, to promote to a queen. Yeah, thanks, computer. You are so charming. Yes, rook takes. And what did I actually play next? What is the best move in this position? I played pawn captures on f5. Didn't I? Yeah, e takes f5. Was that best? I was a little concerned about it because capture and then queen captures, and I've actually helped my opponent to develop. Maybe taking immediately here. I don't know. I think what I played was fine. This is the problem with the computer evaluation, right? Is that as soon as I turn it on, I become kind of addicted to it. It's a simple way of, like, computer likes e takes f5. I think the thought behind it was just opening lines, which seems like the best idea here. And knight to f6, which my opponent played, was in fact the strongest move. The computer prefers knight takes f6 by far. I probably to the somewhat then to the move that I actually played. I didn't see that this did anything that was too harmful in the position, just because what's my opponent going to do, right? Like, of course you're going to recapture the knight, otherwise it just leaps right out. And I really felt like from here on out I was just fully in control. let's just get one of these quick evaluations, and then we'll call this video done and done. Thank you for hanging out with me and watching. After this capture and that move, here's the substantial blunder, knight to d5. Fortunately, it wasn't like I converted to, you know, a -10 position. And from there, it's so far looking like the computer thinks I converted very adequately. I just played the principle of simplify the position and capture material. Oh, good lord. This is what I missed. Queen takes c8 with check. And I would have actually fully gladly, if my opponent had moved up, would I have taken here, or would I mean, I guess the material imbalance is in my favor if I retain the queen, so I probably would just retain the queen. Anyway, I'll probably play some more games a little later today, but that's sufficient for this video. Thank you.